Muchas gracias por estar aquí hoy con nosotros. Este momento es la culminación de los últimos 7 meses de investigación colaborativa con estudiantes de UH, miembros de la comunidad, académicos y artistas colaboradores y, por supuesto, Dr. José Ángel Gutiérrez. En Texas, el acto de hablar español fue criminalizado durante la mayor parte del siglo XX y por eso pienso que es importante hablar en español en este momento, en los primeros momentos de esta presentación. En este momento estamos en la presencia del mural, la Marcha por la Humanidad, también llamada el mural de estudiante chicano, una obra de arte y en el lugar de un sitio del patrimonio cultural. La Marcha por la Humanidad fue pintado en 1973 con fondos del Mayo, Mexicano-Americano Juvenil Organización, por las artistas UH estudiantes y veteranos de la guerra de Vietnam, Mario González y Rubén Reina. También estamos aquí con uno de los fundadores de Mayo, Mexicano-Americano Juvenil Organización, y uno de los fundadores de la Raza Unida Party, Dr. José Ángel Gutiérrez, y los colaboradores Ashley Amaya, Seca Nadia Chia, Rosa Palencia, Aman Saha, Vicky Rahim, Fabiola Ochoa Torralba y mi hermano José Cadwell, quienes colaboraron a través de escritos audiograbados desde el lugar de una prisión. Sin duda, este es un momento especial. Gracias a Stephen Maticio y Melissa Noble de la University of Houston Blaffer Art Museum y Cynthia Woods Mitchell Center por la invitación, y todos los colaboradores, especialmente Caitlin Jones, Catherine Veneman y Lisette Portano Marmolejo. Finalmente, quiero dar gracias a los representantes de la Galería Reyes Finn Detroit, especialmente Elijah Majeski y Parrish Hein en Los Angeles. Y ahora, si todos ustedes lo permiten, voy a hablar en inglés. Es un poco más fácil para mí. Hello and welcome to Theorem number 2, the culmination of our performance. Thank you very much for being here with us. This moment is the culmination of the past 7 months of collaborative research with students at University of Houston, members of the community, artists, academics, and Dr. José Ángel Gutiérrez. In Texas, the act of speaking Spanish was criminalized for the majority of the 20th century. And for this reason, I think it's very important to begin speaking in Spanish in this moment, in the opening of this presentation, this culmination of our performance. In this moment, we are in the presence of an important mural, La Marcha por la Humanidad, which is also called the Chicano Student Mural. This is both a work of art and a cultural heritage site, and it was saved by Lorenzo Cano, who worked very hard to preserve this work of art here at UH, and has also came in contact with me through Dr. José Ángel Gutiérrez during the course of this project and reached out, so I greatly appreciate that. We are also here to acknowledge I want to acknowledge how this mural was funded. It was funded by the Mexican American Youth Organization and painted by the artists, UH students, and Vietnam War veterans, Mario Gonzalez and Ruben Reyna. We're also here, of course, with one of the founders of the organization that funded the mural behind us, Dr. Jose Angel Gutierrez, and one of the founders of Raza Unida Party. And collaborators in this project, Ashley Amaya, Seca Nadia Chia, Rosa Palencia, Aman Saha, Vicky Rahim, Fabiola Ochoa Toralba, and the voice of my brother, Joseph Cadwell, who collaborated through audio recorded writings from his current location in prison. Without a doubt, it's a strange and special moment. Thank you to Stephen Maticio and Melissa Noble of the Blaffer Art Museum and Cynthia Woods Mitchell Center for inviting me for this artist residency over the past academic year. Thank you to all of the collaborators and to the institutional collaborators, Caitlin Jones, Catherine Veneman, and Lisette Portano Marmolejo. Thank you for making this project happen. Finally, I want to thank my gallery representation in Detroit and LA, Race Finn, and Parrish Heinen. The structure of this talk is 4 prompts, and I will begin those prompts after my collaborators share some of the writings that they developed during the course of this performance. And Aman is going to start us off.
Hello, and thank you for coming over. I will share 2 things, 2 of the writings that I've done during the first part of the performance. Are we really living in safe hands? How long have I been sheltered from the truth? The selfish steal from the selfless and poor, and take the spoils as victors, stealing goods, identity, and culture. It seems there's no shame in the nightmare we call reality. No matter what form it takes, it always attempts to torture us and mangle us. And on to the second writing, a question I'd like to pose. What does freedom really mean when demanded by you from the authority? Thank you. I'd like to pass this to Fabiola.
Hello. Hola. Buenas tardes. It's really interesting that as Dr. Maya Stovall was opening up this space, I was writing and taking notes. And as Dr. Maya Stovall was articulating the introduction and the thank yous or agradecimientos to all of the collaborators and the people that made this possible, that I was practicing writing in English, and that I am still in a practice of learning to speak English and learning to think in writing in English. Performance has always been a way for me to evade the dominance of words on a page, and that's been something that's been comforting as somebody who grew up undocumented. Words on paper and white papers can take over your lives. You have them, you don't have them. You have the right ones, you don't have records. You lose your home, you lose your territory. So I'm very grateful to be a part of this in words, in English, and in Spanish, and in performance, and through the body. And to say thank you, I will just share some words that I wrote as I was having a conversation with the tree, who I was reading to outside at the beginning of this performance. The tree here and the tree on the land where I am currently residing. y dice, thank you to the wind, gracias al viento, thank you to the chimes, gracias a las campanadas, thank you to persistence, gracias a la persistencia, thank you for shared learning, gracias al aprendizaje compartido, thank you to distant voices that hold us, gracias a las voces distantes que nos sostienen. And I'm impacted by words such as dehumanization is performed, mediated, managed by the state. I have conversations to remind me of the power of my voice. And I'm thinking about the condemnation of people who are Black, of people who have been blackened, people who have been darkened, and people who would otherwise be known as wetbacks. And the relationship between state violence, overflow from segregation, and detainment, and how that impacts communities on this part of the land and also on other parts of the land for those that are here and for those that are trying to come. So thank you everyone for participating, just sharing some field notes, and hopefully these will unravel in some way, maybe in another performance.
Hello, my name is Rosa Palencia, and I'm one of the students that participated in this opportunity. This opportunity has made me realize that there's different ways to create different forms of art. And this way we decided to all collaborate together. We're all from different parts of the states, different cultures, and we all united to this day to participate at this time. Right now, I'm going to read you what I wrote when we were in the first part of the presentation. Each step we take, those steps have their own weight to it. We choose our own steps. Others do not take decisions for us. We need to free ourselves from others' opinions. Creativity comes from us, not others. Step up, don't fall down, keep going, never give up. We dictate our own future. Breathe, keep calm, take a step, one at a time. Each step has its own weight. Thank you. Now I'll pass it on to one of my other participants.
Thank you, Rosa, and thank you, everyone. I'm Ashley, and I'm really happy to be here. It was an experience, and it was exactly what I thought it would be. So thank you, Maya. So with my writing, when I write, I don't plan, I don't think, I let the thoughts roll in. So I'll give you some of my thoughts. I want to become the person that I love so much. But when will I feel like I belong? ¿Quién seré el día de mañana? Who will I be tomorrow? I don't know. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm Vicky. I'm not a student at UH, but I was chosen to help out by my friend Ashley, and thank you for this opportunity. It was fun. And well, though I'm not a student, I really hope that I helped out to the best of my ability with this project. And when it comes to writing, I was never the best. I'm a math person, honestly. But I try not to think too much because I know, well, if you do that, it's not really, what's the word? It's not real. So I'll just read a passage I wrote down. Coming from two immigrant parents who are from both very different cultures, one from El Salvador, one from Pakistan, it's weird to see like different perspectives from both of them and learn from their experiences. As someone who I guess I could call myself privileged, since they worked really hard for me, and God bless them. I wish the world was a better place for them. And my passage says, one man under God, as our pledge says, all equal. But with my parents, all men are not created equal. And the world would be a much better place if maybe somehow could understand them, or at least try to understand their struggles and differences. If not equality, if not liberty, at the very least, it could start with goodness from one another. At the very least, goodness should be equal to everyone. Thank you.
One of my collaborators didn't speak, so I feel the need just to say something on their behalf for a moment. Zeka Nadia Chia was with me on the first day of Liquor Store Theater when nobody knew what this was and it sounded insane. Now Liquor Store Theater's been everywhere. So I just want to thank you, Nadia, for understanding and being there all these years. Okay, sorry. I couldn't let that moment pass. Like, so, yeah. I couldn't let that moment pass without saying something about Nadia. So, but now I'm going to move into this talk. So, the structure is orientated by 4 prompts. And I'm going to just jump in. Prompt 1, theorem. In mathematics and logic, a theorem is a proposition or statement that is demonstrated by a chain of reasoning. The concept theorem differs from the concept axiom or postulate in that axioms and postulates are considered universal truths, which cannot be proved. This talk/dialogue is a culminating act of performance. Together here with each person on the panel and all of you. This act, this talk, is a performance. Performance here is to be understood as a broad spectrum set of designed and devised actions and moves, yes, and also the predicates and the postulates for those actions in the play of historicity, abstraction, and imagination. In such actions and moves, the play of demonstration and the play of a chain of reasoning hold performative possibility. The words predicate, postulate, performance, and performative each contain within them multivalent moves on 2 fundamental registers, the discursive register, referring to language and grammar, and the dramaturgical, theatrical register of actions from the interior, the minute, the everyday, to the canonically produced. In performance's theorem, or theorem as performance, a novel logic, a recalibration or reorientation of the abstract, the nothing, the something, the concept, the intuition, the experience, the materialist, and the possibility come into view on an event horizon and for a flash, a now time, or an image space. Such sets are thickened, complicated, and distilled into an informative and radical opportunity set of futures. Investigating performance as theorem and theorem as performance from the situation of the past 7 months spent working in this artist residency with my collaborators here, I will continue the series of prompts or chain of reasoning to open up a collective dialogue to follow together with Dr. Gutierrez. Point 2, Borderlands. In the book publication Borderlands, La Frontera, The New Mestiza, the feminist writer and organizer Gloria Anzaldua's preface situates the situation of this artist residency invitation that I received to bring the Neon Theater and Theorem projects to UH. Anzaldua writes, the actual physical borderland I'm dealing with in this book is the Texas-U.S. Southwest/Mexican border. The psychological borderlands, the sexual borderlands, and the spiritual borderlands are not particular to the Southwest. Anzaldua continues, in fact, the borderlands are physically present wherever two cultures edge one another, where people of different races occupy the same territory, where lower, middle, and upper classes touch, where the spaces between two individuals shrinks with intimacy, end quote. Particularizing the history of the Southwest, Anzaldua writes, in Borderlands, preface as well, the oldest evidence of humankind in the United States, the Chicanos' ancient Indian ancestors, was found in Texas and has been dated to 35,000 BC. In 1000 BC, descendants of the original Huachiche people migrated to what is now Mexico and Central America and became the direct ancestors of many of the Mexican people, end quote. Public, private, institutional, and quasi-private public spaces are always already borderlands demonstration sites, sites of language, physical sites, sites of cognition. All of these are simulation locations, and even when one culture seems to be singular, there is an analog, a choice. I need a podium. A subject-object relation at play, which dictates experience. The collective research study this working group conducted began with a survey of human rights, social justice, and environmental justice, legal and policy histories in the Southwest, Texas in particular. Our goal, what was our goal of all of this? To select a critical historical moment, conduct a public poll, and cast this important historical moment in neon lights as part of the ongoing Neon Theater project, which is the Liquor Store Theater project's counterintuitive reversal. Where does the Borderlands theory move? Sites of undecidability, tolerance, and difference are redline spaces of cognition and action where liberal ideals are immobilized. In Anzaldua's theorizing, I locate a generative abolition politics. Borderlands are generative sites that require machination, scale, a multivariate and analytical demonstration that can cognize a single simulation is just that. And yet it is a single simulation that requires a high-frequency, energetic investment in critique and reimagination of the postulates, predicates, performatives, and performances that have given rise to the construction of borders in the first place. Thank you. Prompt 3, abolition. 3 of 4, so 2 more to go. In the book publication, Abolition, Feminism Now, political activist and philosopher Angela Y. Davis outlines the fact that abolition is, quote, increasingly irresistible, both as a mode of analysis and a political practice, end quote, with calls for abolition moving from the margins to the mainstream and landing in headlining mass publications like Teen Vogue and The Guardian. Abolition theory, simply called abolition, logically works toward liberation in empirical experience and at the level of the concept. Illustrating this point, in Abolition Feminism Now, Davis cites Anzaldua's predicate, quote, Anzaldua writes, quote, nothing happens in the real world unless it first happens in the images in our heads, end quote. Davis's thesis on abolition and Anzaldua's thesis on the real can serve as a primer for the Neon Theater project. In Neon Theater, global, racial, heteropatriarchal, ableist capitalism, technologies of power, and counter-hegemonic cultural discovery and creation form an unsatisfyingly, for some, contradictory and cosmopolitan reassessment of historicity. Angela Y. Davis writes, quote, Abolition urges us to move away from myopic and individualistic conceits and to focus instead on how particular cases embody and reflect broader concerns and reveal greater threats to safety and freedom than would be evident when viewed in isolation from larger contexts. An abolitionist analysis moves beyond the literal incarceration of bodies deemed disposable to a broader set of cruel constraints that incapacitate and police. Human subjugation is a generative, slippery business, and the modes and forms constantly shift. Injustices against humanity, such as those committed by corrupt law enforcement, are in the genealogy of systems of chattel slavery, yet aren't precise analogs to enslavement. I turn your attention to several concepts next: genealogy, analog, and historicity, in an effort to move through an abolition potentiality at the level of performance. Prompt 4, fourth and final prompt, historicity. In this fourth and final prompt, I make a move to the now time at hand. 2022 and 1970, when La Raza Unida Party was founded. In the essay publication, Theses on the Philosophy of History, through a series of prompts, the cultural critic and philosopher Walter Benjamin evaluates the role of the historical in the development of practices, values, and conceptions which can be said to exist outside universality, to exist outside of axioms, or to have, in other words, to have historicity in the philosophical sense. In the following quotation, Benjamin contrasts the approach of French historian Fustel de Coulanges versus the historical materialist approach. Benjamin writes, quote, "To historians who wish to relive an era, de Coulanges recommends that they blot out everything that they know about the later course of history. There is no better way of characterizing the method with which historical materialism has broken. It is a process of empathy whose origin is the indolence of the heart, which despairs of grasping, and holding the genuine historical image as it flares up briefly." Benjamin continues, "Among medieval theologians, it was regarded as the root cause of sadness. The nature of this sadness stands out more clearly if one asks with whom the adherents of historicism actually empathize. According to traditional practice, the spoils are carried along in the procession. They are called cultural treasures, and a historical materialist views them with cautious detachment. For without exception, the cultural treasures they survey have an origin which they cannot contemplate without horror. There is no document of civilization which is not at the same time a document of barbarism. And just as no document is not free from barbarism, barbarism taints also the manner in which it was transmitted from one owner to another. A historical materialist, therefore, dissociates themselves from it as far as possible. They regard it as their task to brush history against the grain," end quote. In 1970, La Raza Unida Party was founded in Crystal City, Texas, by a group of students and activists, including Dr. Jose Angel Gutierrez. Last fall, I sent Dr. Gutierrez an extremely detailed, bizarre, out-of-the-blue email describing the collaborative research efforts of the University of Houston students and the scholars and artists beside me, and our plan to represent 1970 in neon sculpture. Dr. Gutierrez responded with willingness and interest and curiosity, synthesizing the energetic possibilities of Theorem, postulates, predicates, performativity, performance, borderlands, abolition, and historicity. In Borderlands, La Frontera de mi Mestiza, Gloria Ansaldúa writes, quote, "We're not copping out. When we know we are more than nothing, we call ourselves Mexican," referring to race and ancestry. Mestizo when affirming both our Indian and Spanish, but we hardly ever own our black ancestry. Chicano when referring to a politically aware people born and or raised in the U.S. Raza when referring to Chicanos. Tejanos when we are Chicanos from Texas. Antaldua continues, Chicanos did not know we were a people until 1965 when Cesar Chavez and the Farm Workers United and I Am Joaquin was published, Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez, and La Raza Unida Party was formed in Texas. With that recognition, we became a distinct people, Ansaldúa continues. Something momentum happened to the Chicano soul. We became aware of our reality and acquired a name and language to reflect that reality. Ansaldúa writes of the language Chicano Spanish. The logical chain, end of quotation. The logical chain of reasoning suggests that La Raza Unida Party is a profound illustration of abolition. A third-party alternative, a third-term mediator to assumed predicates or axioms. Third-term mediator to the assumed dual-party status quo, La Raza Unida Party galvanized Chicana, Chicano, Latina, and Latino American political participation like never before. In brief, La Raza Unida Party's intervention transformed architecture and landscape of American politics, activating millions of engaged voters across communities that were traditionally, deliberately excluded and disenfranchised within a liberal democracy. It follows the chain of reasoning to say that Dr. Gutierrez's insistence upon rupture of categorical imperative or abolition was necessary and was a necessary predicate to expanded participation, creation of a more just system. Abolition as such, is a specular surface for an emergent, urgent new axiom. In the work of Neon Theater and Theorem number 2, I've been tracing a chain of reasoning and performative potentialities across theoretical, linguistic, historical, post-internet, and spatiotemporal borderlands. My intention in this work is to continually insist upon space for the abstract, as in my abstract neon sculpture series, A Blank That Defies Gravity, and for the contradictory in concept, representation, and strategy. This moment punctuates months and months and months of labor, hours and hours across screens, semesters, time zones, and in the process, we moved from a large group of participants to the relentless, devoted collaborators here today. Ashley Amaya, Aman Saha, Rosa Palencia, Vicky Rahim, Fabiola Ochoa Toralba, Zeka Nadia Chia, my brother Joseph Cadwell by audio recorded writings, and of course, Dr. Jose Angel Gutierrez. Thank you, gracias. In transmitting this energetic devotion to this moment, we conclude with an opportunity to be in dialogue with all of us and with Dr. Gutierrez. Thank you. Oh no, I was just like, oh, I need a break. Thank you. I was like, you might want to hold this for me. But yeah, we'd love to be in dialogue if anyone has questions or thoughts or reflections or anything you want to share with us.
I do. At the intro, you credited Lorenzo Cano, and I did give you that name.
Yeah.
But Lorenzo Cano worked for somebody on this campus. And that director was the person who was in charge of the Mexican-American Studies program. His name is Tacho Mindiola. And Tacho and Web Cindy are here with us today, right there. So Lorenzo could only do what Tacho let him do.
There was more than Lorenzo.
Okay, well, come on up. Or
You need to
hit the mic and-
come join.
When the mural was under threat of being eliminated, and each time Lorenzo Cano and other students at the Center for Mexican American Studies took up the battle to preserve the mural. Both times had to do with renovation of the UC, and each time they wanted to cover the mural up. At one instance, because some administrators told us that too many students found it offensive, and he said, well, you ought to be a Mexican, because we find a lot of things offensive. And so, long story short, the mural survived, and it exists today as bright as ever. So there's a big history behind the mural. The artist, it took him, oh gosh, a couple of months, maybe a little bit more. Mario Gonzalez, and Ruben Reyna worked very hard, and with the help of other students, to put the mural together. And when it was put together, the first controversy was a depiction of Uncle Sam with the beard and the skeletal face and so forth and so on, that people, students and faculty, took offense to it. But then again, after much pushback from the center and other students and some people in the community, we were able to get over that battle as well. So the mural has a very long history. It's still as colorful as it was the day it was painted. So I want to say that I'm proud of that. And I want to welcome my good friend Jose Anel here. He was not only the founder of the Raza Unida Party, but also the founder of the Mexican American Youth Organization, MAYO. And so he had many followers throughout the state of Texas, not only mostly university students, University of Texas, University of Houston, Texas A&I, UT El Paso, Texas A&M, all had followers of the Raza Unida Party and the Mexican American Youth Organization. So Angel, it's a pleasure to see you again. Welcome to our campus. You're as good looking as ever.
Well, my mother said, I'm going to answer that in two ways and try to keep it under 100 words. Part of the reason we formed MAYO was because we didn't want it to be centralized and middle class oriented. Prior organizations, they still exist today, hold their annual conventions in fancy hotels that poor people can't go to, certainly not students. Back then, even if you were a male, you were treated like a woman until you were 21. And even then, you were treated like a woman. That is, you've got to do the shit work for the elites. That was our middle class organizations. They had dues, they had a membership list, they had Robert's Rules of Order. I mean, my God, it was, you didn't know the difference except that they called themselves Latin Americans or GIs or something like that. We didn't want that, so we were very decentralized. Now to the real answer to your question. I had very little to do with this, because we were decentralized. We only got together as MAYO twice a year. One part of the year, usually around Christmas time, New Year's, was to decide what are we going to do this year. The second time was in the summer after school let out, basically June, July, to talk about, well, did we do what we said we were going to do? What do we need to change? What do we need to tweak? And we basically said, every group that's out there that wants to call itself MAYO, send 2 people at least. Now, some people brought more, and they all voted. We didn't care. We were not the electoral college. We wanted you to come and participate. So, whomever decided on this, that was their thing. It wasn't up to us in MAYO, the core leadership, to say yes or no. Now, we did say no on several times when there was a proposal to counter what we had already voted on. Said, no, we're going to run this one through, and then next year we'll consider what you got to say. One of those examples was the Colegio Jacinto Treviño. They wanted to stop some of the walkouts we were doing and create that. Said, no. We're going to wait till next year, but if you want to do this, you go do it yourself. And they did. I think the reason Dr. Stovall contacted me is because I'm the last one alive from here, from this picture. And I don't know how she found me or what it was. I was just as shocked and listening to her tell me that she wanted to do this. And God, how does she know all this stuff?
And what was the process like when you were in dialogue with the group so that the project evolved?
But this has been a fantastic experience. I'm glad they're doing this, and that you all are going to keep up with the Spanish.
Oh yeah, I was telling Dr. Gutierrez about that at the Blaffer Art Museum, how this project and the title of the exhibition, Razón, Reason, and our project and our intentional engagement, the impact it has had on how the museum will move forward with language details in Spanish and in English.
From now on, Tacho. Bilingue. Van a hablar Tacha y Chicano, man, you know,
Yeah.
in all their programs. Curate, boy.
Yeah, I'm just beyond thrilled to hear that. And yeah, more than half of the people in Houston especially speak Spanish. It's just, doesn't make sense not to. It's really great. So.
Can you tell us about your, just generally, like, a collaboration seems to be such an important part of this project. How do you envision this collaboration possibly continuing? Because it doesn't seem very finite. We have the theorem, but that sort of implies a future, you know, that you're going to use the theorem for something. So what's your intention?
That's a great question. Yeah. I am obsessed with seriality. Everything that I do is in a series, whether it's abstract neon sculpture, performance, writing, video. There's a certain devotion to seriality. There's a certain like relentless devotedness that I appreciate from the sort of the aesthetics of seriality and the more discursive and research-based aspects. So all of that to say, Theorem really emerged from the Manifesto series, which emerged through the Liquor Store Theater project. So there's like a through line really of working your way through a concept of value, a principle, and sort of taking it to its task, I guess, taking it to task, pursuing that. So yeah, Theorem number 1 was in San Francisco in 2019 before, of course, the age of COVID-19 that we're in now. So it was a different world, and it's been really interesting developing Theorem number 2. And sort of like it's almost a new reality versus the world in 2019 of Theorem number 1, and you can see it in the way that the performance unfolded and sort of the aesthetics and the actual ways of working, toward developing the work. So it is really interesting that, I think, so I'm really, excited to see like how I hope that in the next Theorem, or if I move, I do have another conceptual sort of place where this may go. We'll see if I do another Theorem or if I move to that other conceptual sort of register. But I hope that we're not in another like paradigmatic shift. I don't think we need one of those every 2 years or 3 years. So if we do, let's hope that it's for the better. I guess I'll answer that a little bit, like with regard to the practice of writing that I have with my brother, whose voice was present in the musical score. So, Joseph Cadwell is my brother's name. He's currently in prison. He's brilliant. He was a National Merit Scholar. He went to Brown. I won't go into the details of his situation other than just say I've been writing with him for the past 4 years now. And we have amassed over 500 pages of text based on a practice of serial email communication. And this project also forms a video series called Inside Talk, which is some of the works from Inside Talk are on view at the Blaffer as part of my exhibition there now. But really, writing, the stakes are really high when someone who's in prison or detained. I guess, you know, the title of this, we have a book that's in process. It's called Writing Through Walls. And it really, I mean, it's the most urgent kind of practice you can name when you're writing with someone who's detained. And this is their like connection to the outside world, right? So we have been engaged in this dialogue, and in Theorem number 1, I was really interested in incorporating his audio recorded writings in the score of the soundtrack for the performance. So did the same process in this case, and he, Joseph, will develop writings based on a text that we're reading or based on a question that we're working through, and we typically will respond to one another's writings in that way. And there's a certain like, I don't know, there's a certain difficulty and immediacy to the, you know, sort of practice of writing with someone who's in prison. It's really difficult, you know, it's incredibly draining. But I think, you know, it fits sort of, I'm always looking to investigate questions that have, you know, a lot of, I guess, depth for engagement at both a micro level and the most macro. And so, you know, I don't consider working with my brother like it's not autobiographical. It's just, this is the situation, and at this micro level, you know, I can like transform sort of like his reality in a positive way. But then at the most macro level, millions of people are detained around the world, and, you know, the praxis of incarceration, dehumanization, you know, producing borders and division is just, you know, it's the most macro problem that we all are enmeshed within. So yeah, I guess other thoughts on writing?
Thank you, and thank you for that question. So when I think of writing, that's not necessarily like my first go-to to express myself. Performing arts, I like dance and singing. I always tell people, like, I took up dance so that I don't have to speak or like write it down. But in circumstances such as this where it called for it, I think of writing almost like breathing. So, you know, that's an involuntary action, but you can also control your breathing. And so releasing your thoughts on paper without a certain expectation, just letting it flow, which is part of the reason I chose not to speak in the beginning, because the words that I wrote earlier in those true moments were a little bit violent and had a little bit of profanity, but they were honest, you know, as opposed to writing, I don't know, an essay where it's like it has to be this topic, you have to have, you know, this subject, this amount of words and have it in by that time. Creative writing, it's just that, it's just breathing on paper, if that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Give you a different twist. I had this conversation a little while ago with Kristen Keller, who's the director and head of special collections here in this library. And of course, Dr. Mindela and Cindy know very much what I'm going to mention here. But in the era of Mayo, leading to the Raza Unida Party, we were constantly under police surveillance as well as attacks by individual white supremacists. So we were always wondering, you know, what's next and where's it coming from, especially after our candidate for governor from the Raza Unida Party was charged, Ramsey Muñiz. That was about the same time that the Freedom of Information Act was vetoed by Lyndon Johnson and then overridden by Congress. So we got the Freedom of Information Act. And that's what I want to talk to you about. Other than myself, I don't know anybody else who is digging for those hidden histories. You know, all of us, when you fail, you think it's your fault. You think it's some deficiency in your character. Maybe you were not strong enough. Maybe you were not disciplined enough. Maybe you didn't have enough resources. You always blame yourself or blame somebody near you or around you. Because you never, ever think that the United States government is at war with you. But believe me, it is. And that's what's in those hidden histories. And that's what we were discussing, that I have the largest collection of archives and files. And the last 5, 6 books that I've written are all about those hidden histories. Those people can't speak because they don't even know their files exist. Most people don't think it exists, and you won't write for that. And then it takes 3, 4 years before you get it. So it's just an area that's ignored by a lot of people. But there are the stories there of how the government represses, destroys, neutralizes, eliminates. You go on and on with all kinds of adjectives. They're there. And that's what's happened to us during the social movements. I was asked earlier by the dean of the libraries about what was my most important box in there. And I said, oh, the last one, the Beacons of Defense. I said, what is that? Well, I know you all know your Black history. We just finished that month. You know about Black Panthers, right? The Panther Party? Well, before the Panthers, there were the Deacons for Defense. And so you can't find that. There's a couple of books out there, but not about the FBI files, how they destroyed them, how they intimidated and neutralized them. Those are the jewels that are in those FBI files. So I would suggest that you add that to the creative writing. Creative is not just inventing it. You don't have to invent anything. You have to decipher the files and fill in the blanks because they're heavily redacted. Right. But those are the stories to prove that the people did not fail. Right. They were derailed, they were destroyed, they were neutralized. That's their euphemism for killing you. Okay? So add that to the creative writing list.
Yeah, one of the scholars that I was quoting, Angela Y. Davis, was profiled by the FBI, exactly as you were describing.
No, more than that to her.
Well, right, yeah. I mean, that's an understatement, a gross understatement.
Yeah.
Detained, yeah, she was detained.
Without bail.
Right.
Can we hear from a bit? I know Maya, you have a very reflexive form of performance in a very expanded field, and I'd just like to hear from some of the students who I know kind of entered into this, and then you're asked to be in a performance. What were your feelings like, as this process evolved, and sort of how you factored in, or what your feelings were to be enlisted in a performance?
First off, we volunteered. There was 20 of us. We're, 4 now? We were the last survivors, especially. We were all virtual. We were all doing this virtually and not really performing it. So we honestly did not have an idea what we were going to do. We just saw the opportunity and got it and rolled with it. In life, we have to get that opportunity. If we don't, we never know. So that's what I did, and that's what others did as well. Even one of us isn't a student here. She was brought in by somebody else that is a student. We have those chances in life. We have to take them whenever we can.
In my experience, I'll say I agree with that very much, Rosa, because what happened, I saw an email that described this opportunity. Work with Maya Stovall. I had never heard the name, I'm sorry. I had never heard the name before, and I didn't know what this was about. And I saw it at 4 a.m. And I said, okay, I'll ask about it, and I'll sign up for it. I signed up for it then at 4 a.m. And I didn't know what I was going into, but I just knew it's something, and I want to experience this, whatever this is. I just thought it was collaborative, and I was like, okay. That's fine. And when it mentioned bring someone that you know, I grabbed my nearest friend and I brought her in. I dragged her here. So, but I did enjoy it very much. I was very excited, nervous because I'm not a public speaker, but this was a performance, so I think I feel really good about it.
You know, this is like my first time doing anything like this. I am an artist. I'm an art major here at UH, but I'm much more used to the, I'd say, traditional forms and thoughts of art. I mainly do digital art on my tablet. I also do some sketches, but painting. But as you can see, these are much less abstract and less conceptualized forms of art. So when I heard about this opportunity, I honestly wasn't sure what exactly we were gonna do, but just like Rosa said, I just rolled with it. And I think I've finally come to realize what this kind of stuff is during the performance. I remember I was mentioning to it with Maya for a bit about creating this world, this bubble during our the second part of the performance, the fountain. And I was really starting to see it. I could hear people talking about us. I felt like we had some sort of influence. And that's really wild to me as someone who likes to stay in his own little bubble and doesn't really try to do much at all. I think it's just crazy to leave at least some sort of impact. But this was a wonderful experience.
So there's a set of constraints, and at the root, it's all choreographed. But my approach to choreography is quite conceptual and subversive and seductive. So there are a certain number of equations and calculations that are developed and then provided to the performers, and then the performers are able to internalize and calibrate and calculate and judge and recalibrate based on those equations and calculations that I make. And I ask the performers to help me recalculate and develop equations, based on their interest, their sort of, internal perspective with regard to a particular action or move that I may suggest. So it's not one-sided, but what you saw today was very much a choreography, but a choreography that is deliberately at turns invisible, subversive, seeming to seep from the ground. And the choreography too, is the people who are already there, right? So the people that are already there, the people who can't be there. So there's quite a lot of complexity and intricacy. The choreography started with months of research, months and months of research. And so there's been this protracted and relentless, process of, legislative, historical, policy-based, human rights research. And so we covered the Southwest pretty extensively, and developed a list of potential dates that we would pursue for the neon sculpture. And so this is I say all of this to say this is choreography. Yeah, so, and reaching out to Dr. Gutierrez, it's an email choreography. So this, the choreo politics just don't stop. I could keep talking, but I think It's probably best that I not wax philosophical too much. That's a great question.
Yeah, just to add to that, I also feel like the choreography evolves as the performance goes on, right? Because we did all essentially meet online via Zoom rehearsals, and so the energy changes once we actually fly in and get here and see each other, right? And then we're actually writing, so you're releasing those emotions and you're reading that back, and then you're dancing on top of that, right? And then the clouds move and the sun is shining, so that adds another element of energy, and all of that together kind of just is another part of what's already choreographed, but it's another layer. If you want to add.
I see performance as kind of a practice of everyday living. I have a background in dance, and sometimes some forms of dance are ultrally structured, as in your foot goes here in this timing, or when the song says this word and you move this other part of your body in this way, very, very specific directions, which is nice. But sometimes you learn by just being present to the moment and being responsive, making decisions about how you choose to move with other bodies around you, and not just human bodies, but the bodies that we are in relationship. This mural, this floor, this lighting, everything comes from someone or something else. So I see performance as practice of being in relationality, and that learning how to be with and making decisions about how you choose to be with is also kind of a politic and a way of world making, an ontology, if you will. So as you are making and being responsive, you are creating something new, or you have the capacity to create something new. And to me, as somebody who comes from an activist, organizing cultural work background, that building of relationality is critical, especially right now when we're all being moved to screens and other kinds of technology that are of the material world. We may not remember how to hold a conversation, how to look at people in the eyes, and those are critical skill sets to have. And I appreciate that about performance and dance.
Well, thank you all so much for being here with us. Yeah. And I hope you have a great rest of the evening.
I want to give another thanks on behalf of the Blaffer Art Museum and the Mitchell Center, to Maya, to Dr. Gutierrez, to all the collaborators, to everyone for being